We are live and welcome to episode 6 of the Dynasty Dad podcast. I want to start out today by, reading off our 5-star reviews. You guys gave another 5-star reviews. I got time to read 3 of them here because we have a great guest on here and I want to jump into the content and really get that going for you guys. But 3 of the reviews that we got, first one is from @CoachMike. He put great content and I'm adding this to my podcast list. Like that the Dynasty Dad podcast is interactive with Twitter. Covered actual trades that were sent in, fun, concise, and insightful. So thank you very much. The next one is from FF Guru 721. Love these segments. It's hard-hitting trade advice that will no doubt help you win your leagues. So thank you, Guru. And last one is from T King Mode, my buddy over there at Dynasty Happy Hour. He wrote, "This pod is very insightful, definitely helpful for strategy now and for the future." So without further ado, everybody knows who we're talking about here. We have Dynasty Outhouse. Russ, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I am fantastic and happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's pleasure's all mine. Why don't you tell the audience, how you got started into fantasy football, maybe a story of when you actually got started to where you are now. I know you're working with several podcasts now, but how did you get your start?
Well, how I got into football is kind of funny is absolutely the wrong word, but I was actually a gigantic hockey fan growing up. Like I'm a one sport guy. Like I could watch Sports Center and listen to everything else and have a little bit of knowledge, but like my everything goes into one sport. And for my entire adolescence into young adulthood, it was hockey. And then in the early 2000s, they went on strike for like the 3rd time in 5 years. And I was just like, no, can't do this anymore. So my friend just literally just goes, "You need to play this," and hands me a copy of ESPN NFL 2K5, the one with Terrell Owens, like doing the layup on the cover.
Yeah, I remember that.
And hooked ever since then. Started fantasy football right away. From the second I started playing that game, I'm like, okay, I need every aspect of football in my life. Started watching, started playing, all the Maddens and all of that stuff because the NFL 2Ks went right away. That was the year after they ended up going exclusive to EA. But start playing fantasy football right away. So I've been playing that's like 15-ish years at this point. And Dynasty, man, like I always needed more action. Like back in the day, I was in like 4 leagues and that was just like, whoa, how could you handle 4 leagues? That's insane. And there still just wasn't enough going on because it's redraft. It's impossible to really trade much. And then I found Dynasty on Twitter and I like slowly eased into it. I was just like, okay, I need to learn what this is before I jump in. I actually took like a season of just listening to podcasts and following people on Twitter and all that stuff before I decided to jump in. And then things went nuts. Right away, my first season, I was in 4 leagues as opposed to just joining one and seeing how it went. My highest, I probably hit about 35 leagues, but I've scaled down. I'm probably at like 27 now, but I did drop down to like 22 last year. So like that was a good year for me.
I love how most guys that I have on the podcast, they say it like they're losing weight, or there's like a real addiction problem. You're like, yeah, if I cut it down to this, and
yep.
That's a great, like I have a similar story. Is like for me, it was all about baseball. I was a one sport guy. I played college baseball and that's what it was for me. Everything was baseball. And, I coached baseball for 10 years. And then after I coached, I'm like, I really started to get more into football. And then, I've played fantasy for the last 20 years now. And it was like everything just once I got that first Dynasty league, I started in one with Tyler Gunther and John Bosch and won that league. And it was all writers. And I was like, yo, this is fun. Like, and then you just add more and more. And it's like a gateway drug. You know what I mean? That first Dynasty league hooks you. And I've like at the Dynasty Dad pod, I'm trying to get a lot of my friends, a lot of our listeners to get acclimated to Dynasty fantasy football because I remember my first league I got into, I made a trade and I was like, my friend, I don't know if you know at what is it? Fantasy Professor, Dynasty Professor. He got me into it, Tim Smith. And the first trade I made was I traded 2 first-round picks for Aaron Rodgers in a 1 quarterback league, and I'm like, exactly. And I was like, I need to make a podcast so I can prevent people from making moves like that and try to give them the, because that took a while to get out of that kind of hole. But the interesting thing and what I try to do on the Dynasty Dad pod is, are you a father?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So are there any interesting stories of how you tie in football with your family or fantasy with your family? I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but recently I just did a draft with all my kids. My kids love fantasy football and they're getting hooked on it, So it's like I was telling Tyler last week, it's like LeBron wants his kid to play. I'm like, I'm playing in my leagues until I can get my kids to take over an orphan,
You're the Frank Gore of Dynasty. That's what you're doing. Well, I mean, I have a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter, and my boy right now, if it doesn't have Mario in it, he doesn't care. So if they make a Mario football game, I think I got him. And I got to be honest, I would play the hell out of that game.
I would too. I mean, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers,
Yep.
like my kids play that on Switch. If we can
Yep.
get a Super Mario football, so we might have to, venture into that once we get done with the podcast here.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to write Nintendo letter like, look, I just want to bond with my son, but oh man, like, do your kids trash talk you? My son just recently, I don't know what he's watching on YouTube, just started trash talking me in Smash Brothers.
Yep, they do it all the time. Mine are 7, 9, 11, and 13, so I got 4 of them.
Yeah.
And like when I play Madden with my older ones, I let them get so close, but I can't let them win.
Oh no, I don't even let them.
But when you play like I've started playing Fortnite with my kids and they talk trash. And like my 7-year-old's like, wait, can I not have dad on my team? Like, and I'm like, I'm used to those things. And like, I win a lot of the games, but they're like, yo, can we get somebody else in here? It's just, that's how they work with it. So
yeah, it's and my daughter, she likes having the fun of watching football with me. She has absolutely no idea what's going on. She cheers whenever someone falls down. She's like, "Hey, we got a fall, Daddy." I'm like, "Yes, we did, baby." Sure. It's just she's getting excited.
Fantasy, yeah, get the falls.
Yeah, and she's excited for there to be football. So that makes me happy enough right now because I am very sure because she is super Disney princess, and so there is very short window before that's just too boyish for her. So I take what I can get.
The proudest dad moment I have there with my daughter. She's 11. And this year for the draft, she shows up with a notebook that she wrote down all of the Fantasy Pros ADP. And she wrote it down and she had it and they were highlighted in pink and stuff like that. And it was all bedazzled with like little drawings. And, I put it on Twitter and over 70 of our listeners actually commented and she won. I said, who had the best draft? And over 50 of them said Bella. She absolutely killed it. And it was like a proud moment where she's all into Disney princesses and so super girly, but she's like, there's a $50 Target gift card on the line. I'm winning this thing.
Ooh, she loves Target. Maybe I got to try that.
Yeah. And then they got they got the Starbucks in Target, and she says, I drink the basic white chick kind of drinks. You got to get those
PSLs.
That's right. That's right. Well, the idea of today's podcast is I wanted to talk to you, and break down some of the quarterback tiers and differentiate between players. Like I had a debate with someone the other day, it was like they put on Twitter poll. And by the way, put me on every Twitter poll possible. I retweet them all. I love answering them. Dynasty_DadFF. So hit me up on those kind of things. But they were like, do you want Joe Burrow or Matt Ryan? And I said, well, it's completely dependent. It's dependent on what your team is looking like and what the league looks like. And now is the time where, especially in your super flex, and if you guys aren't playing super flex, you really should be. It is 2020 now. It's not 2008. Get into your super flex. I'm even playing in a couple super duper flex. Is there a real terminology for that? The 3 quarterbacks.
Honestly, that I had one person call it a 3 flex, but even I corrected. I'm like, no, that's super duper flex is what you have to call it because it's such a fantastic name.
Yeah, three flex sounds like that's almost as bad as calling like Scary Terry for Terry McLaurin. Like we got to come up with better stuff than that. But basically, what I try to do at this time of the year is I look at my super flex rosters and I have 15 teams and I'm looking at them and I'm like, what kind of moves can I make? I got to upgrade my quarterbacks in my contenders. A move I made recently was I gave Gardner Minshew and DeAndre Hopkins in a second to get Matthew Stafford and Tyreek Hill. I think Stafford upgrading from Minshew to Stafford, gives me a competitive edge, which we're going to get to Stafford. I absolutely love him this particular season. I feel like he's a guy that's going to win some championships. And now I have 2 quarterbacks that are both top 12. And on the flip side, in the Dynasty Happy Hour Staff League, I'm in a complete year 1 punt. I have 8 first-round picks, and I dealt Lamar Jackson the other day I got Deshaun Watson, a 21 first. That's going to be early, so nice. For me, that's how you win those kind of things. So do you take that same kind of approach? Do you assess your super flex rosters at this time of year and really just try to fine tune some of them quarterbacks, or how do you look at your rosters? What kind of things are you doing this time of year?
Well, this time of year, let me just start out with during what I call it the non-point scoring season, because there's no off season in Dynasty Fantasy Football.
Thank you.
What the thing is, like, I get a lot of people DMing me like trade questions and stuff like that. Should I do this? What do you think of this trade? And it'll be March and they'll be like, well, I'm really weak at wide receiver, so I think I should do this. I'm like, no, man, you're not setting a lineup for 6 months. You're not weak at anything. It doesn't matter. all that matters is value right now. Value is all that matters in the non-point scoring season. We're a week and a half away from scoring points.
Now's the
Don't
time
hold
to
me
make
to that. I have
moves.
no idea what the date is or when the league actually starts.
16 days. I looked it up today.
There you
16
go.
days. I'm
A little
hungry.
over 2 weeks. I was close. So now is the time where I am filling holes. Fingers crossed there's no major injuries between now and the start of the season. And so you want to be ready for week 1 is what right now is. When am I evaluating my teams like you asked before? Oh, man. Every 4 weeks, pretty much. Yeah. Like you hit week 3 or 4, you should have an idea if you're going to win the championship. 2 weeks after that, you should know if you're making the playoffs. You know, there's certain things you can do at every step along the season to sort of push yourself in a direction you want to be in. Never giving up value in trades, but still moving your team. If you're not going to win the championship, if you're just going to eke into 6th place or whatever your last spot is, and you're like, look, I know I'm not going to win. I know you just say, make it into the dance and you could always win. Sometimes you just know you're not. Let's just be honest with yourself.
Right. That's not so much in Dynasty. Is one thing I always say is you want to be in that top 3 or that bottom 3. Otherwise,
middle's the worst.
How many times is 4, 5, 6, 1? And that's when I really started. And my first episode for the Dynasty Dad Pod was I love talking about rebuilds, you know, and I love trying to push people. And I feel like so many Dynasty listeners, they hover in that 4 to 8 range and 4 to 9 range, and you just kill your first round pick. And I'm like, if you're not top 3 or bottom 3, you're not doing it right.
See, the thing is, like, people hear the word rebuild and they think you're just destroying your team. Absolutely not. See, that at least, I mean, I have no idea. I doubt I created these words or this concept, but there's a difference between rebuilding and retooling. If you're in that 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th area, you're not rebuilding your team. But if you have, let's say, Zeke on your team, his value is going to start dropping soon. I mean, let's face it. He's like 25, so he's getting towards his Walker age and, you know, in running back years. So you sell him for DK Metcalf. I won't call him Scary Terry because you just, you know, talk down on. So F1 and a pick. And what you're doing is you're loading yourself with young wide receivers, and you get a pick that when your team comes together, you spend that rookie pick on a running back. You know, you walk away with Swift, Dobbins, or whoever for this year, and all of a sudden you have a team that's coming together at the right time. So, yeah, you being in the middle is the worst, but you don't have to completely destroy your team. Like you were saying before, you had Lamar Jackson and traded him for Deshaun Watson. Almost said Deshaun Watkins, which is very wrong. But like that's a brilliant move because you got a pick, you got assets on top of that. And man, Lamar's not going to break the league every single year. I mean, let's just be honest. He's gonna regress back to the rest of the world. Deshaun Watson's a top 3 quarterback. Like I love that guy. He was my most owned quarterback for a while until I got really bored and just started downgrading every quarterback I own because I trade too much.
We have a trade addict problem.
Yeah, right? I'm the host of the Trade Addicts podcast, and it's for a reason.
Well, that's a great point you said. Is that was actually the first sentence I said of that podcast. Is there is a difference between retooling and rebuilding, and I said that on Goat District the other day. I was like, if I have Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara or Joe Mixon, you know, they're going to be getting to that 26 range. Trade him for Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, those kind of guys, and a first and a wide receiver. And that's not rebuilding. That is retooling. That's moving back. That's resetting the clock and getting a couple years younger. So I'm glad we started talking about quarterbacks. Let's just jump right into it. You know what I mean? I feel like we got a good connection here. Patrick Mahomes is obviously, he's my QB1. I feel like he's the only choice as QB1. And in Superflex, he's my 101. I mean, depending on league strategy, and sometimes, you know, obviously Scott Fishbowl, where you get things for, you know, you get yardage bonuses and things like that. Lamar Jackson is in that same conversation, but Patrick Mahomes just showed his floor, you know, 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, five interceptions. That's a floor. He's the guy you build your team around. You know, he's the centerpiece where you have him on your team and you can, if you trade him, you are getting a massive haul. Otherwise, you ride that guy out, and for the next 10 years, he's going to be in that top 3 every single year.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely 100% nitpicking, but I kind of have Mahomes by himself. He is my easy 101 in Superflex. He is my easy quarterback 1. If Lamar does 80% of what he did last year, this coming season, then it's a tier of 2.
Yeah.
I want to see it a little bit. And I mean, I know after Mahomes can't call it his sophomore year, his first starting year, like people vaulted him to 1 right away.
Yeah.
I think I had him at like 3 or 4. Again, I don't do real rankings, by the way. This is all just stuff in my head. It's like I think of just about everything in terms of trade value. So it's the most valuable quarterback, pretty much.
And if you do rankings, you get roasted. I just put it out there. I was like, we're going to talk about this, and everybody's got their own assessment of things. And I'm like, listen, it's just to talk about tiers. The only reason I do rankings is talk about move from one tier to another and try to stay in that same tier. And to Lamar Jackson's point, I mean, is he going to rush for 1,200 yards again? Are they going to start spying on him? He was at his touchdown percentage was at 9% of his throws.
He had the second highest touchdown percentage ever.
Yeah. And
ever.
Quarterbacks that score 380 points, that's that threshold for fantasy points. It's been him, Mahomes, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and Aaron Rodgers. And they've never done it again in their entire career, and I think Mahomes is going to be the first guy to break that. But I mean, that's something where it's a special season. I mean, if you had Lamar on your team, you were going to the championship last year if you were doing anything remotely right. And I feel like you're absolutely right. I mean, I have them in that top tier, but I do see a tier difference. I feel like there's a big difference between the two of them. And I was advocating for everybody last year, give a little bit on top of Lamar to get Mahomes, because you're going to like that longevity compared to Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said before, like what's going to happen with the offense going forward? First of all, I was kind of terrified for Lamar Jackson that Greg Roman was getting head coaching calls. Like, sorry, just lightning didn't freak me the hell out. But like Greg Roman is known for running quarterbacks, just good quarterbacks in general. But I mean, let's even think further back. Let's think about Tim Tebow when Russell Wilson and Colin Kaepernick first came into the league. They had designed runs so often. Like I could make up a percentage, but I'd be lying anyway. So there's no point in even doing it. So, but every year that went by, there was less and less. They still scrambled, especially Kaepernick, because he was one read. Oh God, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to run. And Tebow couldn't really throw the ball, so I mean, he had no choice.
And only Russell Wilson adapted his game. And he's run less and less, and he's the most efficient quarterback there is, and he's turned himself. He'll run as a last resort, as opposed to those guys were running as a first resort.
Exactly, because people learn. Yeah, you spy. Like, it's a gimmick. It's the wildcat. Is it the future? Probably, just because human beings are getting more and more athletic. So you're going to have these Lynn Bowdens and all of these players that just happen to be better quarterbacks, so they play in the NFL at quarterback. Like, man, some of those moves Lamar Jackson was doing with the ball in his hands, like that was straight up video game stuff. Yes. Like those spin moves, like you literally go, like hand over your mouth, like just throw your body back and scream. Like that's how good they were. But that dude's going to take a hit one day and just be like, I may not run that much going forward.
Right.
Like everyone, like Cam Newton has gotten his body destroyed and he's built like a linebacker.
Yeah.
He lasted longer, probably just for that fact alone. Like, I'm really curious to see if he does. So you want your quarterback to be able to scramble, to be athletic enough to run for yards, to sneak into the end zone and that kind of stuff. You're not going to get, even if no one does catch on to Lamar Jackson's offense and stuff like that, I still think if we magically have to keep our team for 15 years, you will get 15 years out of Patrick Mahomes. You might get 8 to 10 out of Lamar Jackson. Yep. Clearly, I've never had a player on my team for more than 2. So, I mean, that means absolutely nothing to me.
I am an addict as well. I trade like crazy. And people are like, when you start talking, they're like, well, I can trade this guy or this guy on my team. I'm like, my team's completely open. Every team, every player in Dynasty, I treat it like a stock. Stock up, stock down, trade, buy low, sell high. And if you're not doing it that way, I mean, you're cutting off a lot of trade partners. Yes. The only person I've heard Dynasty Rich say that in his first league, he has Drew Brees since his, rookie year, so like, I'm not at that age yet where I can kind of have that many, but I have 15 super flexes and I only have 1 Lamar Jackson share. And it's and I'm trying to sell it. It's something where I feel like you can move back and get Kyler and some of these other guys in the next tier. So let's talk about that next tier. So I have that next tier as Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, and Dak Prescott. I caught a lot of flack on Twitter because people were saying Russell Wilson belongs in there. But let's start right with Watson. I mean, right now we go, is there a more underrated quarterback early on than Deshaun Watson? Because we've moved him. I feel like we finally caught up. But as soon as DeAndre Hopkins left, he went from being, top 5, 6 as far as dynasty superflex startups to I was getting a mid-second round. I mean, he was falling to late first, mid-second, and this is a supremely talented quarterback.
Would you believe that right now, for August on DLF, they only have one QB ADP, but he made his way back up to QB3.
Yes,
which is great because I've always, since he came into, I don't actually like college football. I don't watch it at all, but I've just convinced myself I'm a Clemson fan because I love Deshaun Watson and I love #team big Clemson wide receivers. Like, give me all the nukes, Sammy Watkins, R.I.P. Martavis Bryant's career, Mike Williams, T. Higgins. I love all of these guys. So, like, I've always loved Deshaun Watson since he got into the NFL. And yeah, disrespect was put on his name when Hopkins left. I got to be honest, like I had my trepidations about it. I got worried, but yeah, he fell far. He fell like to QB 10 at one point, like around the level of like Tua and Burrow, and just that's nuts. And I'm glad it corrected itself after I was able to buy 1 or 2 shares.
The dynasty community is very intelligent when it corrects themselves, right? We all have that over.
We are fickle, but long-term intelligent.
All I can say is jump and strike while the iron's hot, because it's kind of like Miles Sanders in July moved all the way up to RB7. Now he's back to RB11, and it kind of evened back out. And I feel like we get that excitement where, I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire moved up to 5th overall in startups, and it's like, okay, now he's back to the end of the first, and we're starting to correct that, because I never like to draft guys at their ceiling. I want to move back and get things like that. And I've made moves where I actually traded Kyler Murray for Deshaun Watson in a first, because people really believe that. And it's like, you got to, when Kyler Murray got DeAndre Hopkins on the flip side, Kyler Murray's stock went through the roof. And yeah, he had a great rookie season. I mean, it was the 4th best quarterback season in Superflex, history as a rookie. 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns. It's that 500 yards rushing floor. And yeah, that offense looks pretty exciting. But there is, people are going to check the tape. They're going to understand a little bit more about what Kyler Murray is. And we're looking at a very undersized quarterback. I love Kyler Murray. I'm not talking trash on him, but I have him as my QB4. But I just had the hardest time moving him above Deshaun Watson.
I wouldn't. I think we have to keep Baker in our thoughts after rookie years. Now, I love Baker. Like, my co-host Brian Haar has Saquon, who's his favorite, so we call him Baquan. Yeah. And it's hard to do out loud because I call him Baker, Baeker, because Baker was my guy when he came out. Like, I remember, like I said, I don't really watch college, but his first drive in the preseason, I was just like, all right, no, yes, I believe in Baker.
He has that swagger, and he had everything about him. And that's and when we get to Baker in 2018 as a rookie, he had that, and he broke that touchdown record. And then we moved him from QB 12, 13 to QB 2, and we all overpaid. I mean, let's be honest. I was believing the Baker hype. I was into it. He did all the commercials. He got a little chub on him, and now he looks ripped and hungry again. And I mean, I got a lot of flack. I have him as my QB 16, which I feel like is low, and people were ripping on me. I mean, they were like, he should be much lower than that, and I feel like he's in for a bounce back year.
We'll get to that when we get to that, but I just want to bring it up that, I mean, Kyler being awesome isn't a given. Now, I get that there was a much bigger difference between Baker and Kyler because Baker got a new offense, Kyler didn't. Right. But still, the sophomore slump is a thing, and it's a thing for a reason. It helps to get DeAndre Hopkins on your team to avoid that slump. But no, I agree so far with what you have. Kyler and Dak, to me, can be flipped. But again, that's why you have tiers, because it doesn't matter. Yep. I mean, they're next to each other in a tier.
Exactly. And Dak Prescott he's a QB1 every year. He was a QB2 overall last year. And, 4,901 yards. And now he only gets better because he gets CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. And now there's so many weapons in that offense where Dak Prescott, he belongs in that tier. A lot of people feel like because they hate Dallas, they put him down there, but he's got that 500 yards rushing floor, 6 touchdowns rushing almost every season. And he's my dark horse for the QB1. If you're not taking Mahomes, it's super realistic. Lamar, that's the guy that I think gets QB1,
Yeah, I love Dak in the Kellen Moore offense. Like, I love him in a faster offense that isn't run the ball 80 times with Zeke, let your defense slow the game down. All of a sudden, Kellen Moore comes in as offensive coordinator, and Dak's slinging. And he's not the kind of guy who will like he didn't mix with Des Bryant for a reason. He's not the throw it up and let the guy come down with it.
Yeah.
But those aren't the receivers he has. Like he has 3 receivers that make great separation. They have a very athletic tight end in Blake Jarwin, and Zeke can catch out of the backfield. And then you have Tony Pollard, who's fast out of the backfield. So this, I love this offense. Man, if Dak just got that contract, honestly, I would not argue someone putting him up in that top tier either. Because he's shown he's consistently a QB1, like you said before, and he made it to QB2 or QB3 like a year or two ago. So it's absolutely understandable to put him up there. I call it the Doug Baldwin syndrome, like being a UDFA or being a 3rd round pick. Like it creates a mountain for you to get over to get that respect.
Right. And people still bring it up. And it's like, you're talking about, 5 years in the league and he's still bringing it up, where that's something that has to go by the wayside. When you keep putting up performances like he has, where he's been a QB1 every single year, you got to give him some respect. And I feel like eventually they do get this contract done.
Yeah. I read something, more than one thing, which makes me believe that's a little bit credible, that they were very, very close. They just didn't get it done in time. So I think once this season ends, they're allowed to negotiate again. They can probably get it done pretty quickly, as long as he is not freaking amazing or freaking awful this year to change things. Yeah. So as long as he does what he does, I think they can get something signed pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
But also, let's just keep going, because the next guy in the top of your next tier is Russell Wilson. He had the same problem. Like, people still bring up that he was a 3rd round pick and kind of hold that against him. Like, man, imagine if people didn't care that he was 5'11", whatever that was, like 7 years ago at this point. He would have been a 1st round pick easy. Yeah. But man, we were so afraid of height. But now all of a sudden, him, Baker, people are finally forgiving Breeze for being short. Like, it just doesn't matter as much anymore. Yeah. So, like, I'm very happy as a Seahawks fan that people cared that long ago. I mean, that's all I could really say about it. But I agree with Russell Wilson. You said before someone was giving you flack about it. I agree with him being in this tier, a tier below. He always ends up with good seasonal totals, but Seahawks run the ball. It's what they do. And yeah. I think they will throw the ball more this year, but I still think there's going to be games where they won't need to throw the ball as much. So he will get those games of like 9 to 11 points. And that's not something you want in your second tier. Right. That's just not how it goes.
Those top 5 guys are putting you 20 plus a week, And
those are the guys you take early. Those are the guys you trade up for. Like, those are the guys you get on your team because it gives you an advantage at a position. Some games Russell Wilson will, because he has the ability and does at least once or twice a year to put up 40-something points. But it won't happen often enough to actually be good for you. Like, if Russell Wilson is my QB2, I'm ecstatic. Yeah. But that also means you're drafting 2 QBs in the first 2-3 rounds, which that's not my deal, but I know a lot of people it is, so good for them. But I love this tier just because, to me, this tier is fun. I mean, I talk too much and I take over pods, so I'm really sorry about this.
I mean, we're on the same page with this. Yeah. I mean, Russell Wilson, the thing I got to say about that is, like, if he ever gets, he's so just, he takes care of business with the amount of opportunities that he gets. And if he gets a chance to open it up, I mean, he's had stretches where he'll play the first 8 or the last 8 games where he's the QB1 overall. Yeah. Because DK Metcalf is going to ball out this year.
If they throw the ball, because the thing that I love about those wide receivers is I would feel fine having Metcalf and Lockett on the same team, because those are the only 2 people that are going to catch the ball. I mean,
and the red zone targets.
They have a couple of scrubs at tight end, which, man, Greg Olsen, I love as a human being. I love him as a tight end, but he's just hurt every year. Will Disley can't stay healthy. Jacob Hollister was alive at the time when no one else was. So I really, it's going to be Lockett. It's going to be Metcalf and a 5 to 10% of someone else. I mean, I really can see both of those wide receivers having like 25% of the target share, and that's fine. Like, so I'm absolutely fine having both of them on my team. But yeah, this tier of Wilson, Allen, and Wentz, because I could talk about Russell Wilson for like the next hour, and that's not really what this podcast is about. I own so much of, I don't own a lot of Russell Wilson because I don't like owning Seahawks mostly until Lockett and Metcalf came around. All right, fine. I can't help it. I can't stop myself from talking. One year when in my home redraft league, there's still kickers in defense, and I had Steve Hauschka, who was the kicker for the Seahawks at the time. And I remember one time they scored a touchdown. I'm like, oh, come on, I needed a field. why am I rooting for the Seahawks to not get a touchdown? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Right.
Wait, why am I upset that they threw a touchdown instead of running it in? No, I want to be happy when the Seahawks score a touchdown. That's it. I don't want to care otherwise.
Yeah, it
so
makes
I've
sense.
actually stopped owning a Seahawks for a while.
I'm
But
an
then
Eagles.
I can't help it.
Yeah, I'm an Eagles guy, so for me, it's like I don't have the most shares of Wentz, but this tier and the next tier are the guys that I own the most. And moving on to the next guy is Josh Allen. You know, they
I
said
own so
he's
much.
what's that?
I own so much of him.
I do as well. I mean, he's been the QB3 since he started. You know, the final 8 weeks of his rookie year and last year. And, you know, obviously he said today he wants to run the ball less. Well, who wouldn't? He's getting a beating, you know, because his runs, as comparison to Lamar Jackson, I mean, his runs aren't designed. His runs are he's scrambling for his life, you know,
Yes.
and he had to be the RB1 his rookie year. Now he finally has, you know, he has Moss and Singletary and he gets Diggs and he's starting to get some weapons. I think Josh Allen is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in Superflex because he's going to give you points and he's very polarizing because they still haven't forgiven him for people not liking him. You know, he became such a deal in those Superflex rookie drafts where he was going early second round
Yeah.
and it was a deal and people still don't think he's a good quarterback. And
well, his accuracy absolutely is an issue, and if he does run less, it's a little bit of a problem.
Yes.
I'm fine with him being Russell Wilson in the fact where I don't need the Lamar Jackson amount of designed runs a game because Josh Allen's not the kind of athlete where he can avoid hits. He's big. He's not as big as Cam Newton, but he's built like that. He's a very large dude.
Yeah.
So he's not pulling those spin moves. Like, I mean, he doesn't have, you know, a 90 on Juke in Madden or anything like that. So, I mean, he's going to be taking hits, which, yeah, he can scramble all he needs. And for fantasy wise, we need him to do that because of his inaccuracy and the fact that that defense is going to be good. So they're not going to need to throw the ball. So I mean, I love Diggs and I hate it for his fantasy value that he ended up on Buffalo, but it is very good for the team and for Josh Allen himself. So yeah, I own a lot of, because like I said before, I downgrade a quarterback a lot, especially when the rest of my team is lacking, to do what you did, get a first thrown in, get a young wide receiver thrown in. And I ended up with so many shares of Josh Allen and Daniel Jones because that was the tier where it's just like, okay, this is the tier where I can go back from Watson, from Lamar, from Kyler and get a solid second piece thrown in.
Yeah.
Get a solid high-end wide receiver too. Like I can get Daniel Jones and Calvin Ridley for Lamar Jackson and probably get more on that side. That's not a trade I did. I'm just making it up just to try and like give you an area of, plus I just love Calvin Ridley and want him on all of my teams. But like that's a move because if you having those top 2 tiers of guys, like you're going for your championship in that. If you need to rebuild, even if you're retooling, you hold on to those quarterbacks unless you got nothing else to move, in which case you're probably rebuilding now that I say that out loud. But yeah, if you want to move back, that's the best way because Mahomes is going to give you an advantage. Lamar is going to give you an advantage. Dak, yeah. Watson, if he can do the same thing, yeah. That next giant group of 12 to 15 quarterbacks probably has a points per game difference of 2 to 4 points. That's not going to, win you a league. Yeah. So it's not really the biggest deal to trade back from whoever your QB4 is to whoever your QB8 or 9 is. And I did that a lot, especially because I take over a lot of orphans because I find it more fun than drafting because I'm terrible at drafting.
It is fun. And that's a real dime there for our listeners is moving back from that, guys. I mean, it's so hard and it can really, unless you have a surplus of picks and a surplus of stud players, moving up to Lamar and Mahomes is so hard to do. That can really kill your team. But moving down to this tier of Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, Carson Wentz, Burrow, Ryan, Stafford, that's how you win your championships. That's how you rebuild and retool your team a little bit because you upgrade at multiple positions and you can get a real haul for those kind of guys. Let's move on to Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz last year, 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns with a JV group of wide receivers. Now you throw in Jalen Reagor, now you throw in a healthy Zach Ertz and a healthy Dallas Goedert and Deshaun Jackson on the outside. Carson Wentz right now, is in that 6, 7, 8 range. He's exciting for this year, I think.
Oh, I love Wentz. I have him all over the place. And you're right. He did really well with complete garbage catching the ball. Sorry, Greg Ward, you did pretty well. And oh man, I had so much hope for JJ Arcega-Whiteside that he was young, he's raw, it was his rookie year. I still have my hopes.
We
They're
all
a lot
want to.
lower than they were.
Exactly. And flip side dad moment here. So my dad, huge Eagles fan. He's like, so you got this podcast, Mike. He's like, tell me about JJ Arcega-Whiteside. And I'm like, you're going to love him. Like, I feel like he's like, a younger version of Mike Evans. He's great at, the way he high points the ball. And I mean, they're going to love him in the red zone. And man, my dad's like, well, I guess I'm not listening to your podcast. And I'm like, that's fine, Dad. But I feel like the sky is the limit with Carson Wentz. What he did a few years ago where he was an MVP type caliber player, I feel like we're going to be back in that area. And I love him for redraft. I love him for dynasty. And you can get him at a discount compared to some of these other guys on here. So that's the end of our tier, our next tier. Let's move into like the two rookies here. And this is where it kind of gets a little bit tricky, is Joe Burrow. Now, I love Joe Burrow this year. I think based off the negative game script, the weapons that he has, with Higgins and Green and Boyd and Mixon, I feel like there's a possibility that he can contend for Baker Mayfield's quarterback, rookie touchdown record. I mean, I feel like there's such a range of outcomes, but I have him at 9 because I feel like he can be in that next tier up because of his size, because of his arm strength, because of how amazing he looked with LSU last year. But on the flip side, with the way he looked before, him and Tua, how do you have those guys ranked?
Well, I mean, just the two of them themselves, like I probably would have thrown them into the next tier below. I would probably shake up the entire next tier below and split it up into 2, but we'll get to that when we get there.
You know what? That's the trickiest thing is those top 8. I feel like that's
nice and easy.
That's nice and easy. And then when you get to that next group, of the next maybe 10 quarterbacks, it's very, it can be varied between person to person and what you believe and the narrative that you're telling yourself and how things go. But I put those two guys in there. It was kind of like a cheat move on me. It was just I wanted to talk about those quarterbacks as rookies, and obviously Tua's more of a rebuild or a retool because, we're not sure if he's going to get how much playing time he's going to get. I still think Fitzpatrick starts the season.
Oh, absolutely.
Twitter's all about it because he throws a 5-yard out to Devontae Parker and they're like, look at that spiral. I'm like, that was 5 yards, man. Like, what are we getting hyped about?
To be fair, I don't know if you watch Letterkenny, but now every time they sing "to be fair" because it sounds so snooty to say the phrase "to be fair," but seeing him being able to mechanically throw a ball smoothly is great.
Absolutely.
Like I remember seeing that video and being like, yes, awesome. He could play this year and be good because that was our big worry was that hip. So the fact that he can turn his body to throw the ball like that across his body, because I mean, he's a lefty, so it's going to throw off every receiver in the NFL and every line in the NFL because are there any other lefties? I can't even think of any off the top of my head. There's got to be one somewhere. I mean, like Mike Vick was one. That's all I really got. But like, yeah. So I'm with you on Burrow. I don't want to get way too sidetracked. I love that Bengals offense. I don't know how I feel about the coaching staff necessarily, but if that offensive line could stay healthy, because I mean, their first round tackle got injured preseason last year, so they technically get a first round pick back. And they traded for a couple of offensive linemen before the season last season who also got hurt. So if they can come back, they can gel, and they could actually have a good offensive line, like you said before, man. Like Joe Mixon, AJ Green with Auden Tate and T. Higgins behind him, Tyler Boyd in the slot. I mean, John Ross on the other side, who's still a burner if he could ever stay healthy. Like they have really good and their defense is awful. Yeah. So they will have to throw the ball. So man, like I have a feeling I'm going to end up with Joe Burrow on my 3 redraft teams just because I'll grab him in the last-ish rounds just to be,
Yeah, people are underselling it. I mean, if you look at what Andy Dalton and Jeff Driscoll and I mean, who else did they have there?
Hey, don't you forget about Ryan Finley.
Yeah, Ryan Finley. That's it. I mean, they had 24 touchdowns combined with a horrible offensive line because look, I mean, they were getting sacked left and right. Joe Mixon was getting hit behind the line. And now they beef up the offensive line a little bit. AJ Green comes back. I mean, I don't think my co-host, Jared, I'll give him a shout out. He rips me all the time because I say Joe Burrow's going to have an opportunity to break that touchdown record. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that he can throw at least 25 touchdown passes his rookie season.
I mean, it might be it might look a little more like a Jameis Winston season, hopefully with
Yes.
less interceptions, because it's going to probably be a lot of garbage time.
Yeah,
So
it's like
it's
Peyton
going to be a
Manning's
lot of
rookie year. Yeah.
necessity as opposed to, look, I'm so good, I'm going to do this because I can.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't saying he's going to lead the Bengals anywhere promising or anything like that. Now let's move in and we'll kind of call this tier kind of in the same area. Two guys that I have right below them are two guys that I absolutely love putting on my. I don't draft them when it comes to startups at this point. I like to draft guys that can appreciate and value. I feel like both of them are kind of at their ceiling of because of their age and things like that. But you got Matt Ryan, who's 35, and Matthew Stafford, who's 31. These guys are the guys you buy when you're ready to get a championship. These are the guys that you upgrade a little bit, like I said, where I gave essentially Minshew in a second for Stafford, because I feel like Matthew Stafford, QB2 over the weeks that he played last year, great wide receiver core. They add DeAndre Swift, who I think is a great value, and they're going to have that Lions offense, as long as they keep Stafford upright, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, and it depends on how you build. If you are the kind of person where I am sometimes, where if you go into a startup being like, I am going to, for some reason, take a running back in the first, which means I'm going to try and win now. Because to me, if you're taking CMC, you're taking Barkley, you got your 3 years ahead of you, and that's probably it. And so that's when I would take a guy like Ryan or Stafford in the startup. And actually, I think I did that in TA8. So at least Ryan and Garoppolo is who I ended up with, because I also now have Saquon Barkley. No, so these are the guys, and the thing is, you can get them 5th, 6th round in a 12-team superflex startup, and that is nothing for a quarterback.
Yeah. And you got to be fluid in your draft. I did the FFPC Pros versus Joes with Curtis Patrick in the GOAT District. And I really wanted Matt Ryan, but I ended up waiting on quarterbacks and getting Stafford. And then I got Drew Brees in round 9, and because I got Joe Mixon and Saquon Barkley with my first 2 picks. And I'm like, all right, I'm in win now. Those running backs fell to me. Now I have to, build those type of quarterbacks. Matt Ryan. Nobody calls him Matthew Ryan.
No. I saw that you combined Stafford and Ryan. I saw it happening.
What's funny is, so my middle child, he's 9 years old. His name's Matthew, and at the time, my oldest son's name is Peyton, and we're really struggling for a name here. And we're actually I was watching ESPN, and at the time, Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, and Matt Schaub were 3 of the top 10 quarterbacks. And I'm like, yo, what do you think of the name Matthew? And the kid loves football. I mean, he's a diehard.
Had no choice.
Nope, exactly. You threw him right in there. One of the guys that's in this tier that's a little bit polarizing, and it's kind of crazy to me because he threw for 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and we're so used to him being way up there, is Aaron Rodgers. What do you feel about Aaron Rodgers as far as Superflex? I'm seeing he's completely relaxed this year. He's not uptight like in years past. He's trying to teach, love some of the tricks of the trade at the quarterback position. And if you look at things last year, I was not an Aaron Jones owner, and I was an Aaron Rodgers owner. And every time they got in the red zone, you're like, all right, we can punch it in here. And Aaron Jones with those 19 touchdowns, really, if we can get 5 or 6 of those towards Aaron Rodgers, he's back in that top 8 quarterback range. But right now, people are discounting him a little bit. What do you think of Aaron Rodgers?
Well, yeah, their draft, let me just say, showed that they don't care about throwing the ball at all. That's the problem. He's good. Let's not mince words about it. He is a very good NFL quarterback.
The efficiency is insane there. I mean, 26 touchdowns and 4.
Oh yeah, no interceptions. Scott Fishbowl, because you get negative 18 points for an interception. You want Aaron Rodgers on your team,
right? That's why I was avoiding Josh Allen. But the Packers, they see AJ Dillon's calves and they're like, we got to get this guy. We got to put him in there. Those calves are bigger than my thighs. I think that was the most ridiculous photo I've ever seen. But Aaron Rodgers has that ability to be a guy that you can get at a discount right now that could possibly win you a championship.
I don't think the play is there. I don't think the offense will be there. Let me say it that way, because the play seems to intimate that I mean him himself. I don't think they're going to throw the ball enough. They don't have enough wide receivers. They didn't get anybody.
No.
And it's just mind blowing. But I mean, Devontae Adams has a chance to being the wide receiver 1 just because of the amount of targets he's going to get as long as he can stay healthy.
I've been saying that all year. He's going to get peppered.
All right. So, but no, let's go down this tier just because I want to. You have Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Baker, Rodgers, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold.
I moved Darnold down one more after I talked about it, but
I can see
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
Because he would
but
have been
not
at the bottom of this tier anyway. Like you
yeah.
have him, but I have to think. Like I would do Burrow, Tua, Jones, Locke, Goff as the next tier, and then have Ryan Stafford, Baker, Rogers as the next. And like you said, drop Donald to the one below because love him as a prospect still. Like
Yeah.
the dude's still like 20.
Oh,
So
I do
he
too.
still has
Yeah.
plenty. And hopefully Gase is gone, which means everyone, once they lose Gase, gets better. So
Yeah.
but we'll talk about Donald when we get there. I think
I
the
had
biggest difference in this tier age is easily the difference in all of this. And like I said at the beginning of this, my brain is wired to think of trade value, and quarterbacks can play till in their 40s, but still Matt Stafford's 31, so he's old.
Yeah.
It does like assume back injury scare the hell out of me, which I mean
Right.
for Wentz also, but I don't care
Rankings
about
are a
Wentz.
tough thing. Is I try to originally look at it when I'm coming over with this is where would I draft a guy? You know, and most of mine and who has the most value, and Daniel Jones and Drew Lock and Baker Mayfield are those guys that I think they can appreciate and value. I think they all are going to have fantastic seasons. Drew Lock, people looked at him as a game manager, but I think they're taking the training wheels off with that offense now with Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. I mean, it could be really KJ
Dude has a
Hamler.
cannon for an arm. You can't make him a game manager.
And
It's just not in his bones.
And he's got that swagger, the same as I think Baker. You know, I think we're going to see a lot closer to 2018 Baker instead of 2019 Baker. You know, I feel like, and then you add in there Daniel Jones, who I think is the most high risk, high reward guy in this tier. I took him in the Scott Fish Bowl because last year I finished top 24, but I didn't have those high upside guys. I had nice, safe players, you know, and it got me to that point, but you can't win it without the high risk, high reward guys. And Daniel Jones, he had 4 games last year, over 30 points. He won you weeks, you know, and I love having him as my QB2.
Yes.
And in one quarterback leagues, I love having him as my second quarterback because if somebody goes down, he's the type of player that, you know, he could finish in that top 12.
Well, yeah, like he's exactly like we were saying before. He's athletic enough to scramble for a couple of yards if you need him to, but they're not going to design runs for him. So he has a little bit of that floor of a couple of rushing yards. Yeah. And his biggest, I mean, turnovers in general, but he fumbled a lot. But fumbling is like one of the most teachable fixes. Like, man, Adrian Peterson was knocked for his fumbles when he was young. Yeah. That dude doesn't drop the ball anymore. Tiki Barber, I mean, to go even further back.
Well, I think what Daniel Jones is, and I was talking about this on a podcast the other day. I mean, he led the league in fumbles by a ton, but he didn't have those security blankets. Evan Ingram was out most of the year. You know, he didn't have Tate was out a lot. Shepard was out. And the only guy he had really was Darius Slayton. And he was trying to force things down the field. You know, he wasn't taking the underneath as much. Saquon was banged up. Now he's got some of them security blankets. And I feel like we're going to see a little bit of a maturing process here for Daniel Jones, and it's going to be a much better season.
Yeah, and they also got rid of Eric Flowers, who was the worst tackle in the league, and they drafted a couple. So hopefully that line is a little better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am all about Daniel Jones. I love having him. If I'm not competing on any team, I want him as my quarterback because 2 years I could see him being at worst that third tier with the players like Wilson, Allen, and Wentz.
Yeah,
like at worst.
He has that rushing floor, and those top 7 guys all have that. If you have that 300 to 500 yard rushing floor, that just adds 4, 5, 6 points to your fantasy each week. You know, the one guy that's really polarizing in here, and you talk to some people and they love him, you talk to others and they hate him, is Jared Goff. He threw for 4,600 yards, 22 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. I mean, I go back and forth on Jared Goff. I do not own him on any of my teams because I've kind of not, you know, I was always a Carson Wentz over Goff kind of guy at his cost. But now he has really dropped down in the fantasy community's eyes. What do you think of Jared Goff this season?
See, I like him. Last year, hold on, let me pull this up just so I actually know what I'm talking about. So in points per game, man. All right, so Goff was QB 21 in points per game, which is actually worse than I thought it was. But man, that offense was just so wrong last year. 2 years ago, he was a top 10 quarterback.
Yes.
And I think McVay is smart. He's not going to let them be as bad as they were. Because even towards the end of last year, they started picking it up. Like his last few, I mean, besides that last game, but like, oh man. So like he had this horrible stretch of like 13, 14, 9. But then no, I'm looking at the wrong guy. Hold
Well,
on.
when they switched to 12 personnel,
Yeah.
you know,
So
when
here we
Robert
go.
Woods took off and Tyler Higbee took off, then Goff started to play a little bit better.
Like here's his last 6 games: 8, 7, 8, 32, 21, 21, 27. All right, sorry, that was 7 games. Like McVay's not dumb. He knows how to use the players he has, and that offensive line went from best to worst. So it was probably a little bit of a shock. Not to mention the whole Gurley situation. Goff is on a very good career trajectory. They still have great wide receivers. They keep drafting great wide receivers. They have 2 great tight ends. They have 2 running backs who can catch out of the backfield. So I am not concerned about Jared Goff. He, again, is not the kind of guy who's going to win you a league, but as your QB2, he's super safe and could give you a decent ceiling of 20-something points.
Absolutely.
And that's what you want out of your second QB, because why do you play 2 QBs in Superflex? Because who's more likely to give you 20 points, a quarterback or your 8th flex player? I mean, it's going to be a quarterback, and it's dependable, more or less. I mean, that Dallas game, oh man, like I think that just has so many people, like that one game, everyone's like, all right, no, that was like the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm never going to watch that
People
again.
watch those one game like that and they go like Baker Mayfield against the 49ers last year, you know, like that game, and everybody like, so I actually did we celebrated our 50th episode at the Dynasty Refinery, and we did 50 fun facts. So that week, Baker against the Niners, if he had spiked the ball every down, he would have had a better QB rating.
Yeah.
Like that just blew
I love
my
stuff
mind.
like that. Yeah.
You know, it's just like, it's fun football facts to jump into. Let's move on to the next tier. Is this one's I'm getting a lot of questions, you know. Sam Darnold, I moved him down a little bit, but Sam Darnold, he finished over the final 8 games after mono. You know, if anybody's going to get COVID, he's hopefully not making out with more college chicks. But Sam Darnold, you know, finishes the QB 10 over the final 8 weeks. Cam Newton, you know, what does he have left? You know, he finished in 2017 as the QB2 overall, and 2018 is the QB12. And then you got, you know, break down a little bit of this tier here. You know, what do you see? What do you like? What do you dislike?
See, this is another one I probably would have broken down a little bit more. Let's start with it. So you actually have them at the bottom. So Darnold, Cam, Cousins, Herbert, Tannehill, and then you have Breeze and Brady. Yeah. I think I would have put Breeze and Brady in a tier of their own,
right?
Because they're guys that are going to give you points this year and could just be done. I mean, we all said Breeze was going to be done last year, so I've been saying Larry Fitzgerald was done for literally maybe the past 12 years. So I'm done saying.
I know
that
my kids call me out on that all the time. I'm like, you're watching Larry Fitzgerald for the last time, and I feel like I say that to him every year because it's
him and Frank Gore
special.
Yeah, but
Frank Gore's not special anymore. He's just out there.
Yeah, but it's
the fact that he's playing is ridiculous because he's our age. And
2 more years, I think, and his son comes in the NFL, and I think he'll be done after that. Because that at this point, that has to be what he's playing for. Like, he has enough money at this point. He's probably in the Hall of Fame just because the amount of stats he's compiled. Yeah. Why else? Why else still be there? Why else still take those hits? But yeah, Darnold, we laugh at Sam Darnold for getting mono, but like my cousin had it, and she had to miss an entire semester of college. Yeah. And she's just a normal human being. Sam Darnold gets hit for a living.
Yeah.
He could literally have died at some point.
Right. And that's why I don't hold those beginning games when he first came back. That's why I said over the final 8 games, you know, when I feel like he finally got healthy. You can always skew to statistics how you want, you know. But at the same time, I feel like that's when he started to finally get healthy, and there's no weapons there. And now at least, you know, they add Perriman, they add Mims. I think Chris Herndon is finally, you know, at a point where I feel like he's going to help the offense if he doesn't get another DUI. Jamison Crowder is one of the most underappreciated, you know, slot wide receivers. It's boring. It's 6 catches for 40 yards, but it's boring. But they're going to be in a lot of negative game strips once Adams got traded. And
their defense
Darnold is a cheap QB2 right now, especially given his age.
Huge buy.
Yep.
Cam, I own no Cam, and I'd like one to like. I mean, I'm in enough leagues where I like saying I have a just in case copy of a share of a guy. Like, just in case Cam goes great, I would like to have one share of him somewhere because he can. I don't think he's going to run the way he used to. I don't think they're going to ask him to. But like, remember Kelvin Benjamin's rookie year, and even Devin Funchess, his rookie year also. He didn't have to do much.
Yeah,
they just threw the ball near him, and their arms were so long and they were so big that they can get it over the other. That's N'Keal Harry.
That's what I've been saying on every podcast, and everybody trashes me for it. I said, Cam likes those tight window throws, and he's had guys that don't separate, and he'll force it. Where N'Keal Harry was getting no love from Tom Brady because he couldn't separate. You know, it's a tough offense to pick up. I feel like he's going to have, you know, a lot of red zone targets. He's going to get a lot of back shoulder throws, a lot of tight windows, and Cam's going to force that in there.
See, I was even excited with Stidham. The second Brady left, I started buying Harry because everyone's like, well, Brady's gone. He's going to be trash. I'm like, no.
That's good. Yeah.
You want a guy that's just going to throw the ball, and Tom Brady's not the guy that's just going to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Cousins is, I think he'll be safe. Cousins is always safe.
Is the vanilla of all the flavors. He's the missionary sex of the quarterback position. He's just there, you know what I mean? And he's so reliable. I mean, he's QB 16, you know, QB 17.
Yep.
He's right in that range. But in startups, he's the most I don't even want to say like underappreciated because he's just disrespected. People are like, yeah, I don't want Cousins on my team. You know, I don't want him as my QB2, QB3. And he just goes out there and he puts up points. And with Stefanski had an offense that really was not catered towards quarterbacks throwing big points. But when he was with Washington, he put up some big numbers. And, you know, now things have changed a little bit in Minnesota where he could be in for a little bit of an uptick here.
Well, I mean, he even still did well enough in that system where they wanted to run the ball 85 times a game. Yeah. And like you said, now, I mean, that they have Justin Jefferson, who is similar to Thielen in that they are super dependable and safe.
Yeah.
So again, like we'll probably see the efficiency go up a little bit, even if the volume does go down, which their defense again has got, like most teams, it seems this offseason has gotten a little worse.
Yeah. And
man, even if Cook does, like he might hold out. Like we don't know right now.
Yeah,
like if Cook holds out, Cousins going to be great.
Yeah, and they're talking about Irv Smith playing as basically that wide receiver 3 role. And
I want him in the slot so much.
Irv Smith is my biggest tight end buy there is. I mean, he's just a fantastic value still.
If I don't have Zach Ertz on my team, I have both Irv and Jonnu Smith. Those are my 3 tight ends pretty much on all of my teams.
Zach Ertz is such a value, but yeah,
every year we find a reason Ertz isn't going to be good like he was last year, and every year Ertz is good like he was last year.
Every year as an Eagles fan, people are trying to tell me the last year, and now you want Dallas Goedert in that offense. No, you don't. You want Zach Ertz.
I mean, you want both, I think, at this point, but like he's not overtaking him.
Exactly. What about break down the Charger situation here a little bit? You know, I was on Sideline Squib the other day, and I said I feel like Herbert starts by week 8 because Tyrod just doesn't quite have it. You know, we saw what he did in Cleveland where he started out 0-4 and they switched over to Baker, even towards the end of there in Buffalo. Do you think Tyrod holds on to the job? Or are you excited for Justin Herbert?
Well, that's 2 different questions.
Yep.
Yes, I'm excited for Justin Herbert. If the team is doing well, I don't think they'll pull him. And if their offense is doing if their offensive line ends up being really bad, I don't think they'll throw Herbert into the end of the season. So I think there's a lot of stipulations as to when we'll see him, but I do believe we will. Yeah. Like we need Herbert to grow, and you're not going to grow unless you're playing. Well, he's not ready to walk in and play, and we think Tua, and if Tua was healthy, he'd be walking in and playing. Absolutely. Health is the reason he's not. And Burrow is walking in and playing. Herbert's not there. Herbert's not ready for that, which is kind of, I live in New Jersey, even though I'm not a Giants fan, but I'm very happy for the people who live in my area that Herbert decided to stay in college.
Yeah.
Because Daniel Jones just worked out better than every angry fan thought he would, but also because they would have started him right away or very, very quickly because Eli was just toast. And he wouldn't have been ready for it.
Yeah. And I feel like this year he's become last year's Daniel Jones and 2 years ago Josh Allen, where we just keep pushing him back. And I mean, I've gotten him at 112 in a Superflex rookie draft. And I mean, that's just absolute stealing, when you can get him that late.
Because they still have great weapons on that offense. Incredible. So it's going to make it hard to be that bad.
Yeah. Ryan Tannehill, I got him in this. I feel like I don't own Ryan Tannehill anywhere. I'm going to be honest. And I mean, did you buy him after it happened, or did you had him I feel like the opportune time was to buy him in between, and he finished as QB3 down the stretch over the final 8 games. Was that a mirage? Is that a perfect storm, or do you believe in Ryan Tannehill?
All of the above. I believe in Ryan Tannehill because even when he was with Gase on the Dolphins, he had 2 over 4,000-yard seasons. The kid has some talent. I mean, he had knee injuries. I think he had 2 of them or separately when he was in Miami, and then Adam Gase holding him back. Is he what he was at the end of last year? Probably not. I mean, he was really good. Yeah. I don't know if he's that good, but he's good. He was drafted pretty early. He's shown that he is talented, and man, you have to respect Derrick Henry in that offense.
Yeah.
And you have, I mean, say what you will about the disappointment of Corey Davis, but having Corey Davis on one side, AJ Brown on the other, and Jonnu in the middle, that's three very athletic players that you need to worry about. So while I don't think they will be as efficient because like they didn't kick field goals last year, they just didn't have to. They scored touchdowns every time anytime they were going to score, they scored a touchdown. It was insane. So he won't be as good as he was last year, but I still think he's going to be. I think he's good. I think he absolutely belongs in this tier. But the thing is, he might be able to score with the people in the tier above him.
Yeah.
No, so I still like him down here just because that's where his trade value is. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to trade. You say you don't own any, so you haven't. You can't trade Ryan Tannehill right now. You can't get a first for him, which is insane.
Yeah.
But I think the production will be there. And the thing is, he's not old. I think he's also like, what, 30?
Yeah. He's in that weird area in Dynasty where you can't buy him for a second and you can't sell him for a first.
Which is horribly
it's like
obnoxious.
no man's land. It is. It's like, because to me in Dynasty, it's a matter of like making moves that make sense. And I try to think about trades all the time. I mean, I do have an addiction, but it's like you're thinking about how to make that trade and how you get that player off. And I can never come up with the ideas for Ryan Tannehill.
Oh, see, I haven't pulled it up yet. I'm looking for it now, but my trade wasn't based around Ryan Tannehill. So it's going to be a little Carson Wentz, Sterling Shepard, Thad Moss, and a 21 third for Ryan Tannehill and Julio Jones.
Oh, that's great. I mean, you upgrade big time there at wide receiver. You can't. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I was thrilled with this, and I mean, I did it with Shane Manila, who is a huge. Well, he's not an Eagles fan anymore, but at the time he was a huge Eagles fan.
So moved off the Eagles last time when we had
after the Deshaun Jackson thing, he was just like, I'm just gonna be a fantasy fan, but he's still a huge Carson Wentz fan. So I was able to be like, dude, he won the league last year, but then got bored and just started selling everybody. So I'm like, all right, let me help you sell some people. Like, you love Carson Wentz. Give me a quarterback that's probably going to score just as much this year, and I'll worry about it after I win this year. That's fine.
I love it. Hey, I promise I would try to keep you at about an hour, and I feel like you and I could probably talk fantasy.
Oh, dude, I could do at least another hour.
I would love to have you on again, and we can kind of match some things up. The last guy I want to talk about here is completely polarizing to people, and because we don't know the situation. He comes out with the montage today with the Karate Kid music in the background.
Oh, so good. Oh man, 101 right away.
I know you get a free case of beer if you draft him in the first round.
I think I'm going to do it.
End of the video, if you win your league, you get free beer for a year. I don't even know what that means, but
for the football season, they said for free season.
Yeah,
I don't like Bud Light. I'll do it anyway.
I know. It's like, so talk to me about Gardner Minshew. I go on some podcasts and they're like, I think there's an opportunity there where if they win 8 games, they got to stay with Gardner Minshew.
Yes.
But if they're in an area where they're, projected to be really bad, if Fields or if Lawrence are there, I mean, they're not going to pass up on that because we're talking about a 6th round guy, but you got to love the stash. You got to love the swagger. Yes. DJ Chark is about to break out.
Him.
And yeah, he's my biggest. I go on every podcast and I talk about DJ Chark because we actually, Jared and I have a bet. He thinks DJ Chark is the biggest bust and doesn't think he'll finish as a wide receiver 2 even. So if he finishes outside,
he has a little bit of history on his side just because there's always a Jaguars wide receiver that flashes and then they go away.
So if he finishes outside the top 24, I need to wear a mankini. I don't know if you've seen those. They got the little strap coming across with the like banana hammock underneath. Yeah, we got a little bit of a weird bet going on, but
I hope you win.
I know.
For many reasons, I hope you win.
The other one we have is on Chris Godwin because I have a love affair of Chris Godwin. If he thinks Chris Godwin will not finish in the top 15, the loser of that one has to do a Waffle House challenge, if you're familiar with that, where you have to be in a Waffle House for 24 hours, and every waffle you eat, you get to leave an hour earlier. So you need to eat your way out of a Waffle House. So we're just kind of playing around with some fun stuff, but Gardner Minshew, I love the video. I love the swagger. What do you think of him as far as your super flex? He's one of my most owned quarterbacks because I was buying him for 2nd round picks all offseason because we talked about you can't buy Tannehill, but I got Minshew. There's an idea here where, with negative game script and the way things have opened up, he could finish in that QB 15 range.
Yeah. See, the thing is, if you go in with that mind frame, then you're golden. He most likely won't be a top 10 quarterback. Let's just throw that out there.
No.
But he can easily be a top 15 to 18 to 20 range. And yeah, it'll be based on volume. Like we're looking at Bortles level here. Like that defense has gotten very bad very quick.
I'm so glad you said that because that's exactly what I say. Is I was like, I feel like DJ Chark could have an Allen Robinson type year, and Bortles he's going to have a Bortles type number. I mean,
and I think what we've seen already, Minshew's already better than Bortles. Like as skill as a quarterback, like it seems that way already.
Yeah. And he's
so
going to be playing for a job. He's going to force it. He's going to be trying to, I love Gardner Minshew's mentality. The league needs more Gardner Minshew type attitudes, and I mean, I absolutely love it.
I hope they win themselves out of Fields and Lawrence. That's what I will say. I hope they do.
The tricky part is if they don't, where's he going to go?
He's done. He's done. You can't. It's just like Jerry Jones couldn't pass on CeeDee Lamb falling to him, even though they didn't need a wide receiver.
Right.
If you're in the top two, you don't either. You trade out for a ton, or you take one of those quarterbacks. It's what you have to do. Like these guys are good. These guys, no one's ever can't miss, but yeah, these guys might be like, that's just how good they are. Like maybe if they get like top 5 pick, they grab Trey Lance and maybe he sits for a little bit and we get a little bit more of that Minshew magic, because let's face it, he sells tickets and that's what they care about.
Handing out the mustaches and everything like that. I mean, that was exciting for Jacksonville and they needed that. So I want to thank you sincerely for coming on here. I mean, I've been trying to get you for a while, and I love the fact that you were able to come on here, share some Superflex knowledge, a little bit of dad, stuff in between there. And, why don't you tell the listeners some of the stuff you're working on, where they can find you, and pretty much anything else that's going on in your life.
Oh man, this will be another hour. Well, I am at Dynasty Outhouse on Twitter. I am co-host of the Trade Addicts podcast with Brian Haar, and that is a member of the Dynasty Addicts podcast network, DAP network, if you will, DAP_network on the Twitters. I am co-host of Dynasty Game Night, which is for the DLF. Trade Addicts is still technically on DLF as well. Dynasty Game Night is me, John Bosch, Matt Price, where you learn nothing, but we just play games, which are based around fantasy football, which I need to get off my ass and make some games. It's been a while. But that is literally just for fun. And it absolutely is. Like, even when I don't make the game and when I don't play it, I'm still screaming at my phone or whatever I'm listening on. Like, I know whenever I know the answers and they don't. I do the split takes with Kevin Cotillo for the Dummies Funhouse podcast network, the DFPN network, the best and only network in town. Started Lunch Break with Stompy for the DAP network also. I think that's it.
That's awesome, man. I love it. It's been a real pleasure having on here. Guys, there's a lot of great wisdom here dropping in here. Make sure you check out all those podcasts. I listen to them. They're fantastic. Keep it up with those 5-star. Well, it doesn't have to be 5-star, but think of it.
Oh, yes, it does.
I said
5-star reviews. Do it.
I said that on Twitter, and people are like, "Well, what if they wanted to give you a 3?" I'm like,
"No. Then you know what? 5 or nothing. Come on. There's nothing in between. It is either 5 stars or you walk away and don't do anything. He's a little too humble to say that. I'll say it for him.
Thanks, Russ. I appreciate that. And thanks for tuning in again, guys, and enjoy the dynasty process.
Deuces.
Bye.